Welcome to this explainer. We all know the tragic, romanticized story of the Titanic, right? That Sunday evening on April 14th, 1912. But today, we're moving past the movie myths. We're going to forensically investigate the actual mechanics of the disaster, the exact cascade of human error, wild arrogance, and just unstoppable physics. It's absolutely fascinating. So let's break down exactly how the unsinkable ship was fundamentally doomed long before she ever even scraped that ice.
And that brings us to the central mystery here. The real question isn't how the ship sank, but why she was speeding directly into a known danger zone in the first place. The Titanic was just past the midpoint of her journey to New York, steaming at nearly full speed to hit White Star's Pier 59 right on time. But she was hurtling toward a massive, well-documented ice field just south of the Grand Banks. Why didn't they just stop or change course? Well, the answer starts with four simple words: no reduction of speed. That phrase comes straight from the personal journal of Lord Mersey, the British wreck commissioner who led the official inquiry. Think of his journal as the ultimate post-disaster black box. He meticulously reviewed the ship's logs and all the testimonies, and he explicitly underlined that specific phrase. For an investigator, this was the glaring, unignorable anomaly: complete, undeniable negligence. To really grasp the sheer danger the Titanic was steaming towards, you have to picture the massive, 4-mile-wide ice field looming ahead of them. Experts at the International Ice Patrol point out that an ice field isn't just one big iceberg, it's an absolute minefield. You've got floes, which are these thick, sprawling sheets of frozen seawater. Then you have growlers. These are dense, piano-sized chunks of ice that can easily rip a hull to shreds. And then, of course, the very large icebergs, massive structures towering over 200 meters. The Titanic was barreling straight into a gauntlet of all three. But here is the most shocking part. They weren't sailing blind. There were 9 other ships navigating those exact same North Atlantic lanes. And as those ships hit the danger zone, they did exactly what responsible mariners do. They sounded the alarm. They fired off multiple wireless marconigram messages, spelling out exactly where the ice was and exactly how massive it was. And the most damning piece of evidence? We know, for a fact, that the Titanic's crew received and actively acknowledged these warnings.
So, as Lord Mersey tallied up these ignored warnings in his investigation, a terrifyingly clear picture began to form. Other ships were actively reporting the growlers and floats. Mersey also noted that ambient temperatures were dropping fast, which, is a classic, unmistakable nautical red flag that ice is nearby. The crew had literally every single piece of data they needed to avoid a disaster, yet they kept pushing forward. It points to a profound, almost unimaginable level of overconfidence on the bridge.
Which really forces us to ask, what or who could possibly pressure a seasoned veteran like Captain Edward J. Smith to just ignore a 4-mile-wide field of ice? Captain Smith knew the sea. He knew the risks. Hitting an iceberg back in 1912 was just as devastating as it would be today. So, for a man with his years of experience to maintain full speed despite direct warnings, there had to be some sort of extraordinary external pressure overriding his basic survival instincts.
Enter J. Bruce Ismay. He wasn't just another first-class passenger. He was the chairman of the White Star Line, the executive who basically reigned supreme over the entire ship. Ismay desperately wanted the Titanic to arrive in New York early to impress the press waiting on the docks. His mere presence on that maiden voyage completely warped the standard chain of command, basically injecting sheer corporate ambition right into the middle of the ship's navigation.
In fact, Lord Mersey's inquiry heavily focused on this one incredibly chilling moment. Around 2 p.m., the Titanic gets a direct warning from another White Star ship, the Baltic, reporting ice about 230 miles ahead. But instead of acting on it, Captain Smith literally hands the physical paper message to Ismay. And Ismay, as he actually admitted under oath on page 222 of the inquiry, took it, held onto it, and just shoved it into his pocket. It's crazy, right? You really have to wonder if Ismay hid that telegram from the bridge crew on purpose, just to make sure they wouldn't reduce speed. It's the theory that has haunted historians for over a century. Ismay prioritizing a shiny public relations win over basic maritime safety. He knew a delayed arrival because of some ice field would be a terrible look for his brand new flagship. That single pocketed piece of paper perfectly symbolizes human ego completely overriding passenger safety.
And from that exact moment, a terrifying ticking clock starts. The window of opportunity to save the ship is rapidly closing as she speeds into the dark. We have the Baltic warning pocketed at 2 p.m. The ship just keeps going at full speed. Hours pass. Then, at 9:20 p.m., in a move that is just completely baffling considering the known ice field, Captain Smith goes to his cabin to sleep. He hands over command and totally removes himself from the equation. Finally, the clock strikes 11:39 p.m. A gigantic, dark mass is spotted dead ahead.
Now, compounding all of this human error was a remarkably deadly trick of nature. The North Atlantic that night was described as glassy, and that is literally a nightmare scenario for spotting ice. Usually, waves crash against the base of an iceberg, creating white foam that you can easily spot in the dark. But with glassy, waveless water, the iceberg was practically invisible. Throw in a bitter 25-mile-per-hour wind whipping the lookouts' faces, making their eyes water profusely, and their vision was drastically impaired. So picture this. You are steaming at 21 to 22 knots straight into a pitch-black, freezing void. Honestly, the unsinkable ship was doomed before the iceberg was even fully visible. At 21 knots, the Titanic was carrying a colossal amount of forward momentum. Physics is absolutely unforgiving here. By the time a dark, unlit iceberg enters the visual range of a man with tearing eyes on a freezing, waveless night, the distance required to stop a ship of that massive weight is mathematically impossible. It all came down to a terrifying 45-second window. That's the amount of time the crew had when they finally realized the danger. Lookout Frederick Fleet spots the towering shadow, strikes the warning bell 3 times, and lunges for the phone to call 6th Officer James Moody on the bridge. 1st Officer William Murdoch has less than a minute to decide the fate of thousands of people. He signals the engine room and orders full to port. But the ship is just too heavy. The momentum is just too great. We really need to pause for a second to appreciate the sheer, terrifying scale of what they were hitting. This was not some piano-sized growler. This was a prehistoric, floating mountain of ice. Reports suggest it was 60 feet high, literally standing eye to eye with the lookouts in the Titanic's crow's nest. At 400 feet long, it was larger than a football field. It didn't just have mass. It carried the devastating physical punch of a solid granite mountain just waiting in the dark. Scientists estimate this iceberg weighed an incomprehensible 1.5 million tons. To put that into perspective, that is the equivalent of 15 fully loaded modern aircraft carriers. Just let that number sink in, 1.5 million tons. When the Titanic, weighing roughly 52,000 tons, went up against a static object of that size, the outcome was dictated entirely by the brutal laws of kinetic energy. No matter how grand the ship was, she was completely and utterly outmatched. And remember, an iceberg isn't like the ice cubes in your freezer. Glacial ice is formed from fresh water compressed under immense pressure over thousands of years. It actually shares structural similarities to a diamond. The Titanic had a double-plated steel hull, an engineering marvel for sure, but against ancient, supercompressed glacial ice, that steel was highly vulnerable. The hull never stood a chance. In a mere 8 seconds of scraping, the unsinkable ship was mortally wounded. At 11:40 p.m., they make contact. It's not a head-on crash. The iceberg scrapes right along the starboard side. Because of that incredible glacial density we just talked about, the collision slices through the steel hull like it's nothing. Investigators later compared it to cutting open a tin of sardines. In less time than it takes to tie your shoes, 3 forward cargo holds and 2 engine rooms are violently blown open to the sea. As we wrap up this explainer, we're really left pondering the fatal cost of hubris. The Titanic didn't sink simply because there was an iceberg in the water. She sank because human ego, immense corporate pressure, and the absolute illusion of control convinced seasoned experts to actively ignore a steady stream of obvious warnings. It's a terrifying reminder that nature's rules always win. It kind of makes you wonder, what contemporary icebergs are we currently steaming toward at full speed, absolutely convinced our modern technology makes us unsinkable? Thanks for joining me on this, and keep questioning the world around you.